Next of kin pays its respects to our oldest and greatest storytellers, the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on. Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of Next of Kin. If you are new here, welcome. It's really nice to have you here. My name is Casey Barros, and I'm not a doctor or a psychologist or a dietitian. I am a health journalist who has spent the last almost 20 years asking questions of our brightest minds on how we can all live happier and healthier lives. And today we've got a topic that's really close to my heart. Almost 5 months ago, I started on a sobriety journey. And in that short time, I've come to believe that sobriety is my superpower. Now, whether you're sober, whether you're thinking about it, or whether you are not at all, there were so many eye-openers in here for me, and I think there will be for you too. The most important one is probably how it all ties in to this myth that we've, especially as women, been sold about having it all. My guest today is Sarah RUSBATCH. She's a grey area drinking coach, and she's a bloody good time without booze. I can't wait for you to hear what she has to say. So sit back, pour a cuppa, relax, and enjoy. Here's Sarah. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, Casey. How are you?
I'm good. It's lovely to see your face. Thank you so much for jumping on with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's, I love having these conversations, and I know that a conversation with you based on the small, short chats that we've already had is going to be a great one.
I think you and I could talk for a million years, and we will do that. But for the purposes of today are really to share a little bit about your journey, a little bit about my journey, and talk about this incredibly important topic for people who are listening. And I just want to open the discussion by saying that this is a safe place, that there's no judgment here for wherever anybody is in their own alcohol journey. There will be people listening to this who love drinking alcohol and don't think that there's any issue with that, and they're quite happy doing that in their lives. There will be other people sitting here who are going to hear a lot of bells go off as they hear us talking today, who might be right at the beginning of that journey, and there might be people who also align with where you're at. And you're far further ahead of me in our sobriety journey. Tell me, you are a grey area drinking coach. What does that mean? What is grey area drinking, and how do you help the women that you work with?
So thanks for that introduction. And I think it's really, really brilliant what you've done there in terms of setting the scene, because I think it is so important that people know, first off, I am not anti-alcohol, and I am not here to try to say everybody must stop drinking. Absolutely not. But I am here to say, if you've noticed that you've started to develop a more challenging relationship with alcohol, or you've started to notice that it's changing, it's impacting you more as you're getting older, there's a reason behind that, which we'll dive into. And you have full permission at any point in your life to pause and say, how is alcohol serving me right now? And that's what I'm very much about, is just sharing some information and sharing my story, because I find that a lot of women hear it and they feel very aligned to it. And so coming back to grey area drinking, and working as a grey area drinking coach, historically, our conversation around alcohol has been, you're an alcoholic in quote marks, or you're not. And if you're not, then you're a social drinker. And I grew up in a world that, I can clearly remember my first exposure to someone who I considered an alcoholic was Sue Ellen in Dallas in like the 1980s or something. And she was just this woman that sat around in silk nighties and dressing gowns all day, drinking hard liquor out of a bottle and just like doing the most disgraceful things. And I remember then, like, that's what we form, like, opinions, we form ideas at a really young age. And to me, that meant an alcoholic was someone who didn't have a job, they drank in the morning, they were completely, their life was given over to alcohol. But what if you're not in that category, but yet you still have started to notice that alcohol is becoming a wee bit problematic in your life? Then what are you? And that's where grey area drinking fits in. And I know from, the work I've done and from the number of people that I've supported that millions of people sit in this category of grey area drinking.
I wanted to ask you about what the landscape of drinking in Australia looks like. What do we know from the evidence? Because we've had this explosion of at least interest in sobriety and what they call the sober curious movement. Do we know what the impact of that is on the data? Who's drinking more? Who's drinking less? What do we know? Just sort of set the scene for us in terms of what does the state of the use of alcohol look like in Australia right now?
So one of the most concerning statistics, well, let's start with the positives. The positives are the younger generation are drinking less. So we know that, I started drinking at 14. That was very normal back in the UK in the 1990s. That was kind of what we did. But we know now that that is happening less. We know that the younger generation are drinking less. We also know that some studies are showing that alcohol use is generally coming down, apart from one demographic. And the only demographic where alcohol use is going up and not down is middle-aged women. So women who are in that category from about 40 to 65 is where we're seeing alcohol use go up and not down. And the problem that I see with this is most of these women, because I speak to them day in, day out, I've got community with thousands of them, we don't identify ourselves as being alcoholics. And that's what keeps us stuck, because society says the only people that need to stop drinking are people who classify as an alcoholic. But what if you're in that grey area? And some of the signs, from anyone listening who might be thinking, well, what is this grey area that she keeps talking about? There's a couple of points and a couple of checklists that we can kind of run through very quickly to just help identify, am I a grey area drinker? So
great.
One of the first things would be we make rules around our drinking. And you're laughing there, so I know that you've been there like I was. We make rules, but then we will often find a reason to justify breaking the rules. So my rules were I don't drink Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I don't drink white wine on an empty stomach. I don't drink before 5 o'clock. Unless it's at the weekend and then I'm out having a lunch, then that's okay. But then it would be a Wednesday and then I would feel like a drink. And then I'd be like, oh, no, I could just have a drink tonight. If I have a drink tonight, I won't have one tomorrow. So I'll have tomorrow's units tonight. And then that'll be okay because there was just constant negotiation and constant chatter. We have a relationship with alcohol, whereas people that are not in the grey area, they're what we call take it or leave it drinkers. They are people that will have a drink every now and then. My friend Nat, she will go out. You'll be like, oh, I'm going to go to the bar. Do you want a drink? And she'll be like, what do I feel like? Oh, should I have a cider? Nah, I'm just going to have a Coke, actually. And that will be her. Whereas me, that was never me. I was planning my drinking. I'd probably have had 2 or 3 glasses before I even went out. Alcohol had a purpose and a presence in my life where I dedicated time, energy, and a lot of mental headspace to it. A couple of the other signs might be we often drink more than we intend to. I'm only going to have 1 or 2, but then we often have more. Another sign might be it's our go-to whenever we experience any kind of adversity in our life. So I'm stressed, I'm angry, my kids are doing my head in, my partner and I have had a massive argument, my boss has really upset me, whatever the thing, our first thought is, I need to have a drink. And we're turning to alcohol to make the feelings of that thing go away. And we'll come on to that in a second. I'll just finish a couple more. We're silently worrying about our drinking. So no one on the outside thinks we've got a problem. If I'd said to anyone, oh, I'm really worried about my drinking, pretty much all my friends would have been like, don't be ridiculous. You don't need to worry. You just drink like everybody else. Because the thing about grey area drinkers is we tend to surround ourselves with other grey area drinkers. And then our kind of benchmark of what is an appropriate amount of alcohol becomes a little bit skewed. So we might be silently worrying about our drinking, but we're not sure what to do. And we started to notice the negative impact of it. And all of sleep, anxiety, putting on weight, low energy, low mood, all of those things. And we might be like, right, I'm having a clean week. I'm not going to drink this week. I need to take some time off. But all those, we actually struggle to do that. So those are kind of some of the main tips, the main kind of points around identifying whether we sit in that grey area.
It's so funny because I actually felt anxious listening to you rattle off all of those rules going, yep, done that one, tick, 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 tick. And I mean, I did every single rule under the sun. And like you say, we find or make excuses because of the challenges that our lives present. And I've said this a couple of times on the podcast before. I really feel like our lives are harder than they've ever been. And I say that with the full acknowledgement of the privilege with which I say that. Life does feel particularly stressful, and I think that midlife increase in drinking, particularly for women, is so interesting to me because I feel like it dovetails perfectly with that myth that we were all sold about having it all. And I think it's that this is a symptom of trying to have it all. We can't have it all at once, and we are trying desperately to do that. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to go back to the days where our place was in the home with the children and our partners went off to earn the money. I love my career. I wouldn't give it up for anything. But doing that and the lion's share of the work at home and the lion's share of parenting and holding all of that emotional load that we know that we all hold and try to maintain some semblance of friendships and a sex life and hobbies. Remember hobbies? I don't have any hobbies. And I remember you saying in your book, there was a moment where you kind of raised your glass to a friend and said, this is my hobby. And by the sounds of it, we got really good at it, right? That's what mummy wine culture is all about.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're so right. Like we are, on paper, life has never been easier in terms of what we've got available to us, in terms of, the way we live our life now. But in reality, it's harder, because we've got all of these different impacts, social media and the stressors in our life. And women, especially in midlife, I think are juggling more than ever. And you throw in the mix, you've got, aging parents, you've got kids who are becoming teenagers and all that comes with that. And you might be dealing with both of those. And as you say, all the other stressors that come. And so you've got this catastrophe of all these things happening in a woman's life. And then you've got big alcohol coming along going, hey, I know you're stressed. This is your reward. This is your relaxant. This is how you can switch off at the end of the day. So I feel like big alcohol have really stepped in at a time where women are struggling and they're vulnerable and gone, I've got the perfect solution for you. And it has worked, because the most shocking stat that I've heard, Casey, is that alcohol use disorder in women has increased over 80% in the last 30 years. Now, that's not a coincidence. That stat comes from the fact that the women are the most stressed they've ever been, and big alcohol have come in and gone, I've got the solution to your stress.
And we believe that we deserve it. And by all accounts, we do. Like, we really feel like we do, and we do deserve it. But what we deserve is a break, more support, something that lights us up, something that makes us happy. But we've been sold this dream that this toxin, which is what it is our shortcut to relaxation. It's our full stop between work and home, between day and night, between on duty and off duty. And I relied on it for years and years and years of my life. And the last thing that I ever want to do is come across as being in any way preachy. But I really honestly feel like sobriety is my superpower now. Like, you couldn't pay me to give it up. And I'm wondering, what do some of the women that you work with tell you about some of the impacts of quitting that surprised them?
Yeah.
Because we think, you mentioned before, weight, skin, sleep, all of those things are wonderful, wonderful impacts. But what are some of the things that happen to their lives that maybe surprise them, but maybe don't surprise you anymore? That's like the gold in the experience.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it comes straight into your point there about the fact that there's no judgment on using alcohol as a solution to all of those issues. But because alcohol is a freaking amazing short-term solution. And in the initial 20 minutes of having that drink, we get this huge neurological impact in our brain where these neurotransmitters get released and we feel in that moment better. But the problem is the long-term impact is absolutely terrible, but it's subtle. And so, the subtle changes I started to notice how much alcohol was impacting my sleep. So even 1 or 2 drinks, I would be awake at 2 or 3 in the morning, and then I'd be tossing and turning a bit and I wouldn't be able to get back to sleep. So then the next day you feel tired, you feel you're not on your A game at all. You're feeling a little bit lethargic, a little bit unmotivated, a bit of a foggy head, like never enough that you need to stay in bed and be hungover, vomiting all day, but just a bit meh. And then that also causes this low level anxiety that, again, we're just feeling a little bit less confident. We're feeling a little bit less anxious, a little bit more anxious. We're worrying about things a little bit more. And so to answer your question, what do women notice? Like the first thing that they notice that they just cannot believe is, my anxiety has gone. And I was drinking because I was feeling so stressed and anxious. But in actual fact, it's removing the alcohol that has actually that's been the solution. Because what many people don't realize is that when we drink alcohol, it causes our brain to release the stress hormone cortisol. And people who drink even 1 or 2 drinks 3 or 4 nights a week have a higher baseline of the stress hormone cortisol circulating around their body than people who don't drink at all. So that's one of the first things they notice. The second thing is, when women have more energy and they're sleeping well and they've got more mental capacity, they've got a clear head, they feel more motivated, what happens is they start to grow in confidence and they start to grow in self-belief. And when you grow in confidence and you grow in self-belief, you start believing that a bigger life is possible for you, and you start wanting more, and you don't just want it, you actually go out there and get it. So I see women who change careers, who take on like all these new hobbies, they set up businesses, maybe they leave a relationship that has not been serving them for 20 years, but they never had the confidence or the energy to do anything about it. And in doing that, they feel so happy. And so it's not just removing alcohol, it's what that low level anxiety and tiredness and foggy head has been doing to rob us of the confidence to go after the life that we actually want.
Oh, if you're listening to this and not watching us on YouTube, I am smiling like a Cheshire cat over here because I can feel you. First of all, I can feel your passion, which is like you were just born to do this. But secondly, I can feel in my body the exact impact that you're talking about. And that's why I call it my superpower, because I feel like stopping drinking has unlocked this new level of life for me. One of the reasons that, I had toyed with sobriety for a long time. I'd done a year, I'd done 3 months, I'd done 6 months, I'd done 2 weeks, I'd done just until so-and-so's 40th birthday party. I had done every section of time available, every sober campaign, Feb Fast, Dry July, October, all of them. And then I would count down the days until I could drink the very thing that I had been abstaining from to celebrate, like we all do, right? But one of the most beautiful things that has happened for me is that I didn't trust myself on alcohol. I didn't trust what I said. I didn't trust what I did. And it took me such a long time to learn that. And I would almost start dreading well before the event. First of all, I would be incredibly, quite socially anxious, which a lot of people wouldn't believe when they kind of know who I am. I seem like quite a confident person, but I actually am quite socially anxious, especially in big settings of people when I know a lot of them and they know a lot of my past. That makes me feel incredibly anxious. So like you, I would have a couple of drinks before I would get there because it would allow me to ease in. And then, of course, I would swing too far the other way. I wouldn't have eaten because I would be so anxious about going. But one of the beautiful things that has happened for me is that I quite look forward to going to so-and-so's 40th birthday party now, because I know that I'm going to remember every conversation. I know that I'm going to walk in there feeling quite confident, still a little bit shy and a little bit anxious, but I'm going to feel quite confident in my ability to hold and conduct myself in a way that I feel proud of. And I know that the next morning I can say, yeah, I'll take my kids to the beach at 6:30 a.m. or go to the 7 a.m. gym class, because I know that I won't be hungover. If I'm hungover again in my lifetime, it will be far too soon. I used to be so awful hungover, in bed all day, vomiting all day. Like current me can't believe that I did that to past me. I feel really sorry for her thinking about who she was in, all those days spent in bed. Just, I feel really sad. I feel really sad for her that I didn't get here sooner, and better late than never, of course. But what was your journey like in terms of that merry-go-round of, I'm going to try this, I'm going to have to take a break, and then straight back to where you were. What did that period of time look like for you, and when did you know that enough was enough?
Yeah. So I think it was after I turned 40 that I really started to notice that I didn't seem to have a grip on my alcohol use, and B, it was really impacting me. So obviously through my teens, 20s and 30s, I had a huge capacity for alcohol. I never really got hangovers. I was always the one that was up after 4 or 5 hours sleep, could happily go do the day, be in the pub by lunchtime, backing up and having a few more drinks. And I wore that as a badge of honor. I was like, I am hardcore. And that was my identity. That was who I was. And in my 40s, I really started to notice that I was using alcohol more and more, and I was starting to be a little bit secretive about it. So, like, you always know it's a problem when you crave the thing that's made you feel shit to stop you feeling shit from the thing and that's what you're craving, right? So there would often be a Monday. I don't know why, but Sunday was quite often my biggest drinking day. And Mondays, I always had my rule, like I don't drink on a Monday. I absolutely don't drink on a Monday. But on a Monday night, my husband took my 2 kids. They both had like cricket training at the same time. So he'd go at 5 o'clock, and I would go into the pantry sometimes with a coffee cup, and I would have red wine hidden behind all the olive oil and stuff. And I would drink that red wine, but I would do it in the pantry. There was no one in the house, but it was like I was hiding it from myself, because if I was doing it in there, it's like that kid that buries their head in the sand and thinks, well, if I can't see anyone, no one can see me. It was almost like that's what I was doing to myself. I was sculling red wine out of a coffee cup in the pantry and then going out into the kitchen, almost convincing myself I hadn't just done that. And yeah, I mean, that was kind of when things started to take a little bit of a turn. But again, at no point did it ever look to anyone else like I had any kind of problem. So I was starting to notice that my anxiety was really increasing. I was noticing that I was often waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning, even if I just had like 2 or 3 glasses. And my solution to that was to take a sleeping tablet as well as the alcohol to avoid the 3 a.m. wake up. And so you can imagine how I felt the next day, having had the best part of a bottle of wine plus a sleeping tablet. And then getting up, and I always went to the gym, and I always had my kale smoothies, and I was living this contradictory life where I was just trying to convince myself and lie to myself that there wasn't a problem going on. 2017, when I was 41, there was a couple of incidents that happened. I went to a party, I fell over, I was very, very drunk. I don't remember much about it. I landed, face planted onto a concrete driveway and cut my nose open, cut my lip open. Had to get taken home and put to bed. And I woke up the next morning to my 5-year-old daughter standing by the bed and said, "Mummy, what happened to your face?" And you know, that feeling of just utter self-loathing, utter self-disgust. And I didn't know how to deal with that feeling. And so I drank. And I couldn't drink directly into my mouth because my lips were so bruised. So I had to drink white wine through a straw. Not in the morning, like that evening, just as a way to not feel how I was feeling. And a couple of weeks later, I'd gone to a friend's birthday. It had been a big boozy session. The next morning, I was meant to be taking my son to cricket. My husband was out fishing, and I was still over the limit at 8 o'clock in the morning. I knew that I couldn't drive. My hands were like shaking. And my poor son, all he wanted was his mum to take him to cricket on a Sunday morning, and she couldn't because she was still pissed from the night before. Again, just shame and disgust. And so I said, right, that's it. I'm going to do 21 days off booze because I've clearly got a bad habit. And they say it takes 21 days to change a habit. So I did my 21 days, and I just kept going because I was like, oh, this is what it's like to not have anxiety and self-loathing 4 mornings a week. This is what it's like to have 8 hours sleep a night. I made more, at the time I had my own recruitment business, I made more money in 3 months than I'd made in the entire 12 months previously because I was so switched on. I was on my game. I was motivated. I was energized. I was clear-headed. I was going to the gym, and I grew in confidence because how do we increase confidence? We increase confidence by keeping the promises we make to ourselves. And I was making myself a promise, I'm not going to drink today. And so every morning when you wake up and go, look at me go, I'm pretty good. Whereas it used to be waking up and that first thought being, oh, well, you're a loser. Well, you said you weren't going to drink last night. Oh my God, I can't bear to pick up my phone. Oh my God, I've definitely got to stop drinking. I'm definitely not going to drink tonight. If that's how you start your day with that kind of internal chatter, it's not really setting you up for a day of positivity and really, excelling in areas of your life. So I did that 100 days. And then I was like, well, I can't never drink again because that would just be weird because I'm Sarah, the party girl, and I'm the house that everyone comes to before we go out, and I'm the house that everyone comes to after the party. So I thought I'll be fixed now. I've done 100 days and now I'll be one of those normal every now and then drinkers, and I'll just have a glass of wine every now and then and all will be fine. And I remember going out for dinner the first time I drank after that 100 days with my husband and my best friend and her husband, and I sat there with my one glass of wine. I was like, look at me. I have got this sussed. Like, I am a normal drinker now. Just have my one glass every now and then. Within a couple of weeks, I was back to drinking the same amount as before because that is how it works with grey area drinkers. And so that followed 2 years of battling, trying so hard to moderate, Casey. I still believed that moderation was the goal, that moderation was what I had to aim for. And I would take breaks. I would go back to drinking. I couldn't understand why I would go back to where I was before. And then finally in 2019, I realized that everything in my life was better when I didn't drink. Everything. And I was never going to be a moderate drinker. And I had a decision to make. And it was to carry on drinking the way that I did, which was just not serving me anymore as I got into my 40s, or to remove alcohol, which I'd done several times and I knew was amazing. And I had to change my beliefs around alcohol. And when I did that, that's when it was. So April 2019, I had my last drink.
Wow. So just gone 5 years.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. Quite an achievement.
It is. It really is. And, in those early days, you couldn't imagine getting to 5 years. And I'm only like 4 months in to this time. And I think the difference for me this time is I haven't put an end date on it. Every other time it's been until the end of the month or the end of the week or so-and-so's party or whatever it might be. And that feels different for some reason. People keep asking me, is this forever? Worried, like, are you never going to drink again? And I'm like, I have no idea. But until I desperately want to change it, then this is what I'm doing. And like I said, you couldn't pay me to change it right now. We've got so much going on in our lives right now. I've just cared for my dad for 2.5 years. My 6-year-old believes sleep is for the weak. And my husband and I said to each other the other day, can you imagine if we were drinking? How much harder our lives would be if we were drinking. I want to get stuck into some of the nitty-gritty and make sure that I've understood some of what's in the book correctly. So for people listening, the people who set our guidelines for alcohol use in Australia is something called the NHMRC, the National Health Medical Research Council. Their guidelines, and please, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong because this is your space, their guidelines currently for Australians say no more than 10 standard drinks in a week, remembering that how we pour them is not standard drinks. No more than 10 standard drinks in a week, no more than 4 in a sitting. My understanding of the US guidelines is it's no more than 1 a day for women, no more than 2 a day for men. And my understanding of the UK guidelines is it's no more than 14 units of alcohol per week, which is a slightly different system to what we're using. But my understanding from what I learned in your book is that Canada says only 2 drinks per week with a recommendation of 0. Is that right?
Yeah. So it's huge when Canada came out and said that. I think it was at the beginning of 2023. And it's confusing that every country has different guidelines of what is recommended. But Canada is the first country to come out and say there is no safe amount of alcohol. And at the most, anything more than 2 drinks per week will start to increase your chances of the diseases, the chronic diseases and health impacts that come directly from alcohol. We know that drinking any more than 3 drinks per week starts to increase a woman's chance of developing breast cancer. And 1 in 5 breast cancer diagnoses are now directly attributed to alcohol.
Wow. There's so much there that I want to unpack. The first thing, though, I will just want to read people listening this section from your book. Okay. So this is a little section from Sarah's book, Beyond Booze. And this says, in a 2023 World Health Organization report titled No Level of Alcohol Consumption is Safe for Our Health, it says, alcohol is a toxic, psychoactive and dependence-producing substance and has been classified as a Group 1 carcinogen by the International Agency for Research on Cancer decades ago. This is the highest risk group, which also includes asbestos, radiation, and tobacco. You talked about substance use disorder. Do I understand correctly that that's classified as more than 8 standard drinks per week?
Yeah. So alcohol use disorder is classified as more than 14 units per week, which would generally end up being about 8 glasses of wine.
Okay. But national guidelines say no more than 10 standard drinks a week. So our national guidelines are essentially at the level of alcohol use disorder. Are they not?
Yeah. And
that's insane.
That's what's confusing. And going back to talking about the concept of grey area drinking and alcoholism. So we don't use the term alcoholic anymore in the medical world. It's alcohol use disorder, mild, moderate, or severe. And mild alcohol use disorder would be classified as above those 8 drinks per week.
Wow. And I just want to be really clear for people listening that addiction is a really serious mental illness that needs proper medical guidance and care. My understanding is that substance use disorder, which obviously includes lots of different substances, is one of the most common mental illnesses in Australia. And I'm really glad that we now recognise it as a mental illness rather than a poor lifestyle choice. But please, for anybody listening, know that, addiction needs proper medical support. I just want to make that really, really clear. So one of the biggest issues, you just mentioned the breast cancer statistics. The Lancet published a paper recently that exposed a lot of that breast cancer evidence, and they made some recommendations. Can you tell us what were their recommendations around advertising of alcohol?
Yeah, so they came out and said that, and specifically talked about the numbers that they predict of breast cancer diagnoses that we will be having by 2040. But they said this is not inevitable if we step in now and create change. And because many, many factors will impact breast cancer, and many of them are lifestyle factors that we could, if there was an education and information out there, people are able to make more informed decisions. There was a study done by one of the universities in Melbourne that found only 1 in 5 women are aware that alcohol can cause breast cancer. Only 1 in 5. The Lancet came out and suggested that policymakers ban the commercial marketing of products linked to causing breast cancer, such as alcohol. Now, it was really interesting, Casey, because when that came out, the next day was the launch of a shop in Australia, I won't name them, who launched their Mother's Day campaign, which was about 4 or 5 different types of pajamas covered in champagne bottles, wine glasses, and wording, time to wind down, written all over these pajamas. So that was the Mother's Day advertising. It was just ironic that campaign launched the day after the Lancet made this suggestion and this appeal to governments to ban the commercial marketing of products linked to causing breast cancer.
That must be so frustrating for you to see, being so in the know. It's funny because it's only since I've stopped drinking that would even register as being untoward or inappropriate for me. And if they've got, I think I read in your book, and I'm not sure whether this was the same campaign, but that this store, had mannequins in their windows that had a cask of wine under their arm and a glass of wine. And I think you mentioned in the book, can you imagine the number of young girls that would have walked past that mannequin in that shopping centre across the launch of that campaign and see that messaging and think, well, mum drinks wine. That's what mums do.
Yeah.
To be able to wind down.
Yeah. Totally. We know the evidence that daughters that grow up with mothers with alcohol use disorder are 4 times more likely to develop alcohol use disorder themselves because they've never had true self-care modeled to them, because they watch their mums turn to wine whenever they're dealing with any kind of adversity in their life. And just to remember, alcohol, a lot of people say, I'm not addicted to alcohol, but alcohol use disorder is more than 8 large glasses of wine per week, more than those 14 units. And there's different types of addictions. And you were talking before about getting help for physical addiction, and alcohol is one of only 3 substances that the human body can die from withdrawal from. So if you are physically dependent on alcohol, it's so important you go to a medical rehab facility and get medical support, because it can be fatal if you stop drinking on your own. But the majority of the women I work with are emotionally addicted to alcohol. So they don't need to drink in the morning. They don't need to drink every day. But it's their emotional addiction, because we've got to remember, like Professor David Nutt says, alcohol is up there in the top 5 most addictive substances in the world. So, and addiction starts in the brain. It's an emotion of, we're struggling to moderate a substance that we crave and that we get a sense of relief from, but it provides negative consequences as well. And I think really starting to understand the difference between physical dependence and physical addiction on alcohol versus that emotional addiction is really helpful as well, because that's where I was. I wasn't physically addicted. I could take my breaks. I could do 21 days. I could do 100 days. I could do Monday to Thursday. But I kept going back to drinking. And when I did, I kept staying stuck in the same pattern. That to me is grey area drinking. That is emotional addiction.
I remember interviewing someone a few years ago who said the question to ask yourself is, could you stop if you wanted to? And most people, I believe, who are grey area drinkers, like you, like me, would say, well, yes, I could, but I really don't want to.
Yeah.
And so that's not the right question anymore, right?
Yeah. I like asking the question, what feeling comes up in you? And maybe the listeners can consider this question to yourself right now. If I said to you, from tomorrow, we're going to take 90 days off alcohol and we're just going to do an experiment and see how you feel. Take it or leave it drinkers and be like, yeah, sure. Okay, I'll take 90 days off. People who are grey area drinkers, like, to me, that would have horrified me. It would have been like, oh, I can't do it tomorrow because I've got that party next week. I'm going on holiday then. Like, we've got all of these excuses and all of these reasons. And I always say, if you can't take 90 days off, then you need to take 90 days off, because that's a sign that we're in that place.
Oh, totally. I felt the anxiety in my body. I felt my shoulders creep up around my ears as you were saying that. And then I was like, oh, hold on, no, I don't have to do that because I'm already doing that. I had a little panic. I just wanted to tap into the habit change piece, because you said, I'm going to do the 21 days. And so many of these sobriety campaigns, I always used to love doing Feb Fast because it was the shortest month in the year. It's like, I only have to get through 28 days. That's it. But I've interviewed this beautiful, on this podcast actually, Dr. Gina Cleo is an incredible habit change expert. And she says that that broad strokes, the evidence suggests the average is about 66 days that it takes to break a habit. It can range from anywhere from, I think, 14 or 21 right up to 260 days or something. But she said the experts by and large agree that it's about 66 days. So, and I used to do that myself. I do the 30 days or the 28 days or the 3 weeks or whatever. And it just isn't long enough to genuinely break to break that habit. And if you double back, listeners, if you double back to episode 1, we talk about alcohol quite specifically, and Gina gives you some quite tactical tips about how to help break the habit, that you can't just take it out, that you need to replace it with something else. So for example, for me, I still need to pour a glass of something when I come home from work. I haven't been able to completely break that habit. But today, it's a sparkling water with some cucumber in it, or a glass of kombucha, or a cup of tea or something. But I think it's really important that, you do get some support, and that's where your beautiful network of people, I think, really comes into play, that you've got the support of you, but also the support of others. And we'll talk about that towards the end of the chat, and then share some links for that. I want to talk about alcohol's link to relationships. So for context, my dad was an addict. He wasn't addicted to alcohol, but he had certainly used alcohol throughout his life as a crutch. But he was addicted to heroin and to speed before my time. He really cleaned up his act when I came along. But he always used to say to me, Casey, the drugs aren't the problem, the drugs are the solution. And I never really got that. I sort of, now I can really understand that they are, in that moment, they are the solution. But alcohol does have a real link to not only our relationship with ourselves, but our relationship with others. And certainly, like you said, grey area drinkers hunt in packs, right? We want to be with people who enable that behavior, who make us feel okay about doing it. And that's often why people who decide to take some time off or to stop drinking altogether can find that some of their friendships do change, because people don't like having that mirror held up to them, because it means that they need to question their own behavior. But what was so interesting for me about my relationship with Dad when I was caring for him through his cancer journey was he and I had always drunk together. And Campari and soda was our drink. We loved to sit and have a couple of those together. And it will always remind me of him. And if there's one thing that I'm sad about not drinking anymore, is that I don't get to taste that anymore, because it felt like a direct link to him, and he's not here anymore. But what I noticed in him as his cancer journey progressed was that he, first of all, he started asking me to make them weaker. And then secondly, he wouldn't finish them. And then lastly, he wouldn't touch them. He still wanted me to pour them. He still wanted the ritual. He still wanted that connection with me. But his body was literally rejecting the alcohol. And I know what that's like from being pregnant. Your body is like, everything changes and you don't want those things anymore. And it was just a really interesting observation for me watching that, knowing that this cancer, this foreign, he wouldn't call it an enemy, but this invader was taking over his body. And that very naturally, he was rejecting this toxin that for so long had propped him up. I just thought that was really interesting to watch.
Yeah.
And it does, like our alcohol does hold value, in inverted commas, for some or many of our relationships, and that's hard to give up.
It is, but I like my thoughts on that are, yes, we have rituals, and for many of us, like I've got a client and she was like, I'm going away for my anniversary. We always go to this same hotel. We have a balcony. We sit on the balcony. We drink our bottle of champagne. We look at the sunset. I can't believe that I'm going on this holiday. And now what am I going to do? It's our anniversary and I don't know, it's going to feel weird. And I was like, but why does the content of your drink have to contain alcohol for you to enjoy that moment? Like and that's why alcohol-free drinks can sometimes be so good. Keep the ritual, change the ingredient but if we really step back and go, it's actually not about the alcohol. It's about the moment. It's about the ritual. It's about that point of connection. So we just have to be intentional with making sure that we replace the connection and we don't just let it go. So something that happened for my husband and I was, he would come home from work. I would hear his truck pulling into the driveway. That to me meant it was wine time. He would come in, he drank beer, I drank wine. We sat outside in the alfresco, had a drink together and talked about how was your day, la-di-da. And then I stopped drinking. And then he stopped drinking. And then we stopped having that ritual of connection that we didn't even realize had been so important in our marriage. And then we started to feel drift apart. We weren't feeling seen, heard, understood, cared for by the other person. Life is busy with young kids. And we ended up in a couples therapy room, and the couples therapist said, but can't you see here that you've lost that ritual of connection that having that drink brought you? And it doesn't mean you have to have a drink, but you do still need to have something that is a ritual of connection for you. And so we ended up swapping that for a walk. And he would come home and we would take the dog around the block, and it would just be how was your day? What? And honestly, that saved our marriage.
Wow. That's amazing.
But it just goes to show that it doesn't have to be the alcohol. And so many of us put the emphasis on it has to be the alcohol. I can't celebrate my 40th without drinking alcohol. I can't go on holiday without drinking alcohol. How will I cope at that wedding without drinking alcohol? But in actual fact, it's not the alcohol. And if we need alcohol to enjoy a person or to enjoy an event, then we don't actually enjoy that person or that event, right? You know, that's the actual hard facts about it. And so that's why, you know, you asked earlier, what are some of the changes that women notice when they make the decision to remove alcohol? They do notice that friendships change, relationships change. They might develop deeper, more authentic connections with people who are on that same journey as them, and naturally might end up pulling away perhaps from some friends who are the bigger drinkers. I've still got a mix. I've got some friends who I've definitely pulled away from, and I've got others who are still my drinking friends and I still have a great, great connection with, and it just doesn't bother them or me that they drink. Because like I said, I don't judge. It just doesn't bother me. It wasn't serving me anymore. And I support thousands of women, but they're the ones that come to me that want to make a change. I will never go out there and preach and say, you must never drink alcohol.
Yeah, I love that. And I also just want to say to anybody listening, the merry-go-round at the beginning, in my opinion, is actually really important. It's really important because nobody can make the change other than you. And you need to get to a point where you are so done that you've got no choice but to make the change, that the pain of staying the same far outweighs the pain of changing. I just want to read people a little section from your book, and actually I'm going to combine a couple of little sections here. Okay. It says, as one client described to me recently, it's like going from living in black and white to living in color. One thing I know to be true is that sobriety takes us back to our most authentic selves and allows us to step into the body and life of the person we were always meant to be. And I just love that, because I feel like the further I get into my own sobriety journey, in some ways, the more I revert to who I was. I feel more creative. I feel more connected to and drawn to spending time with animals. I feel more connected to spending time outside. I want to dance more. I want to spend more time listening to music. I feel almost like this reversion to who I was as a child, I suppose. But really, that's who we are, right? Like, that's our more authentic selves. And I just thank you for the work that you're doing. I think it's such a gift to the world, and I'm so grateful to have had the chance to connect with you and to read your beautiful book. I think you should be really proud of the work that you're doing.
Thank you. And I always say, like, alcohol dulls your light. We've all got a light inside us. We all have an authentic self that wants to be seen, that wants to be discovered. But all I know is when I was drinking 3 or 4 nights a week, I was not connected to myself in any way whatsoever. I wasn't connected to my body. I wasn't connected to my mind. I was using alcohol, and that was an escapism for me. But when we're escaping the stressors in our life, we're also escaping ourselves. And in coming back to ourselves in sobriety, we actually get to know ourselves. And it's a journey. Like, you're just at the start of yours, and I'm excited for you. And for me, I'm continuing to peel back layers and get to know myself. It's just the most incredible journey. It's not always easy, but life is not always easy. And I think that, again, it's coming back to us getting out of the idea that life is meant to be a walk in the park all the time. It's never going to be. But when we're using alcohol to avoid any emotions or to avoid the situations that make us feel sad or angry or stressed, we don't find healthy other ways to process those. And that's what we get to do in sobriety.
I love it. Just to end us on a really vapid note, Can we talk about the face? Because my face has completely changed since I stopped drinking alcohol. I'm not a particularly photogenic person. And I feel like when I was drinking, maybe 1 in 10 photos of me would be like, okay, I'd be okay with. Now I feel like 5 in 10 of them I'm okay with. Like the angles of my face have completely changed. Did you find the same, and do you find the same with the women that you work with?
It's so funny. So I run alcohol-free programs for women 4 times a year, and I've just done one in April. The next one will start on the 1st of July. One of my clients was like, I was in the mirror and I was rubbing at my face. There was this mark on my face and I couldn't work out what it was. And I said to my husband, what's this? It won't come off. And he went, oh, that's your cheekbone, love. And she was like, I haven't seen my cheekbones for 40 years. And like the change, I get everyone in my challenge to do a selfie on day 1 and day 30. And it's the best anti-aging secret out there. Everyone's spending all this money on potions and Botox and facials and all the rest of it. It's like, just quit booze and you will regress about 10 years in your face. The bloating, the glow, like everything changes in your face. It's incredible.
It's amazing, isn't it? Well, on that note, we can wrap up. You need to get out of here. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you. Oh, man. Did you get as much out of that as I did? I love her. I really hope that something that you heard today made sense. Let it rattle around. See how it makes you feel. Try it on. Take it for a walk around the block. If you were listening to that going, tick, 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 this is me, try the 90 days. I promise you, your life will go from black and white to in living colour. As always, the home for these is Substack. Over there, you will catch my fortnightly episodes of the podcast, but also my alternate weekly drop of an article, something that means something to me and that I hope will mean something to you. I love you for being here, and I need to go and make myself a cup of tea. Thanks for listening to Next of Kin. I am Casey Barros, and I can't wait to be back in your ears again. See you next time. This podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a medical or qualified professional.